What's up, Thirsty Curiosity? Para Wang Chung, aren't you supposed to be in class? What's up? What's up, Okuyasu? Welcome to my bi-weekly. Hi, guys. Welcome. Oh. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Book Club. It's me, your dad. Let me put something on screen for you to look at. Do I have any, like, calm-looking pictures? Maybe it's not like a Metal Gear Solid spoiler. Surely I have something. Ooh, okay. There we go. I'm just talking about to say hi, you guys. What's up? I'll wait a little bit, just till like, oh my god, 1:30. Then I'll start. If you're new, this is my reading stream. Oh, and there's no one. That's fun. I'm streaming to no one. But I'll wait all of about 2 minutes. Oh, hi, you're back. Hi. Yeah. What's up? How are you, Alp? This is gonna be just like... Oh, you left again. I guess your internet's going bad or something. We'll see if you come back. Is my tea warm? Do you stream on Twitch? I do stream on Twitch. Sorry, hot tea. I do stream on Twitch. I'm good. What about you? I'm good. Welcome to Book Club. I'm gonna be reading for you guys. I do stream on Twitch. I believe it's in my bio, if I'm not mistaken. If you want to follow me there, I play games. I just discovered your account. Oh, that's fun. Where'd you find it? Bruh. On Twitch, I'm playing Mario Drawn to Life and Undertale, if you like any of those things. I think your voice is so cool. Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Making me giggle. What's up, Jay? Welcome to the reading stream. Hold on, let me check real quick, Alp, if my thing is in my bio. Yes, it is. Okay, it's 1:30. Welcome back to me reading 1984 in a British accent, because it's fun. Right. What's up, Logan? Okay. Last time we met, I don't remember what his name is. I believe it was Winston. Something very British. It was Winston. Reading time, that's true. Your phone keeps bugging out, that's fine. And then we learned a little bit about Big Brother and the party. So let's keep going. Welcome, Aloha 8906. I need to remember the voice I did. I believe it was something like this. Chapter 2. As he put his hand on the doorknob, Winston saw that he had left the diary open on the table. "Down with Big Brother," was written all over it, in letters almost big enough to be legible across the room. It was an inconceivably stupid thing to have done. But, he realized, even in his panic he had not wanted to smudge the creamy paper by shutting the book while the ink was wet. 1984, by George Orwell, is what we're reading. Yeah. He drew in his breath and opened the door. Instantly, a warm wave of relief flowed through him. A colourless, crushed-looking woman with wispy hair and a lined face was standing outside. "Oh, comrade," she began in a dreary, whining sort of voice. "I thought I heard you come in. You think you could come across and have a look at the kitchen sink? It's got blocked," and it was Miss Parsons, the wife of the neighbour of the same floor. Miss was a word somewhat discountenanced from the party. We were supposed to call everyone comrade, but with some women one used it instinctively. The continuation. Yeah. "Welcome, a pinch on fire?" She was a woman of about 30, but looking much older. One had the impression that there was some dust in the creases of her face. Winston followed her down the passage. These amateur repair jobs were almost in daily irritation. Victory mansions were old flats, built in 1930 or thereabouts, and were constantly falling to pieces. The plaster flaked constantly from ceiling to walls, and the pipes burst in every hard frost. The roof leaked whenever there was snow. The heating system was usually running at half steam when it was not closed down altogether from motives of economy. I'll never be able to read this book again without Awful's voice playing in my head. Repairs, except what you could do for yourself, had to be sanctioned by remote committees which were liable to hold up even in the mending of a window pane for 2 years. "Of course, it's only because Tom isn't home," said Miss Parsons vaguely. The Parsons flat was bigger than Winston's, and dingy in every way. Everything had been battered, trampled on, as though the place had been visited by some large violent animal. Games, impedimenta, hockey sticks, boxing gloves, a burst football, a pair of sweaty shorts turned inside out, lay all over the floor, and on the table there was litters of dirty dishes and dog-eared exercise books. On the wall were scarlet banners of the Youth League and the Spies, and a full-size poster of Big Brother. There was a usual boiled cabbage smell, common to the whole building, but it was shot through by a sharper reek of sweat, which, one knew, this was at the first sniff, there was not hard to say how. It was the sweat of some person not present at the moment. In another room, someone with a comb and a piece of toilet paper was trying to keep tune with military music which was still issuing from the telescreen. "It's the children," Miss Parsons said, casting half-apprehensive glance at the door. "They haven't been out today, and of course—" She had a habit of breaking off her sentences in the middle. The kitchen sink was full nearly to the brim with filthy greenish water which smelt worse than ever of cabbage. Winston knelt down and examined the angle joint of the pipe. He hated using his hands, and he hated bending down, which was always liable to start him coughing. Miss Parsons looked on helplessly. "Of course if Tom was home, he'd have put it right in a moment," she said. "He loves everything like that. He's ever good with his hands, that Tom is." Parsons was Winston's fellow employee at the Ministry of Truth. He was a fattish but active man of paralysing stupidity, a mass of imbecile enthusiasms, one of those completely unquestioning devoted drudges on whom, more ever than on the thought police, the stability of the party depended. At 35 he had been just unwillingly evicted from the Youth League, and before graduation into the Youth League he had managed to stay in the Spies for a year before the statutory age. At the ministry he was employed in some subordinate post for which intelligence was not required, but on the other hand he was a leading figure in the sports committee and all other committees engaged in organising community hikes, spontaneous demonstrations, saving campaigns, and voluntary activities generally. He would inform you with quiet pride between whiffs of his pipe that he had been in appearance of the community centre every evening for the past 4 years. An overpowering smell of sweat, a sort of unconscious testimony of the strenuousness of his life, followed him about wherever he went, and even remained behind him after he had gone. Have you got a spanner?" said Winston, fiddling with the nut on the angle joint. "A spanner?" Miss Parsons said, immediately becoming invertebrate. I don't know, I'm sure. Perhaps the children." There was a trampling of boots and another blast on the comb as the children charged into the living room. Miss Parsons brought the spanner. Winston let out of the water and disgustedly removed the clot of human hair that had been blocked up the pipe. He cleaned his fingers as best he could in the cold water from the tap and went back to the other room. Up with your hands! Yelled a savage voice. A handsome, tough-looking boy of 9 had popped up from behind the table and was menacing him with a toy automatic pistol, while his small sister, about 2 years younger, made the same gesture with a fragment of wood. Both of them were dressed in the blue shorts, grey shirts, and red neckerchiefs, which were the uniform of the spies. Winston raised his hands above his head, but with an uneasy feeling. So vicious was the boy's demeanour that it was not altogether a game.
"You're a traitor!"
yelled the boy.
"You're a thought criminal! You're an Eurasian spy! I'll shoot you! I'll vaporize you! I'll send you to the salt mines!"
Suddenly, they were both leaping around, shouting,
"Traitor! Thought criminal!"
the little girl imitating her brother in every movement. It was somehow slightly frightening, like the gambling of tiger cubs, which will soon grow into man-eaters. There was a sort of calculating ferocity in the boy's eye, a quite evident desire to hit or kick Winston, and a consciousness of being very nearly big enough to do so. It was a good job that it was not a real pistol he was holding, Winston thought. Miss Parsons' eyes flitted nervously from Winston to the children, and back again. In the better light of the living room, he noticed with interest that was dust in the creases of her face.
They do get so noisy," she said. "They're disappointed because they couldn't see the hanging. That's what it is. I'm too busy to take them, and Tom won't be back from work in time."
"Why can't we go and see the hanging?"
"Why can't we go and see the hanging?"
roared the boy in his huge voice.
"We want to see the hanging! We want to see the hanging!"
chanted the little girl, still capering round. Some Eurasian prisoners guilty of war crimes were to be hanged in the park in the evening, Winston remembered. This happened about once a month and was a popular spectacle. Children always clamoured to be taken to see it. He took his leave of Miss Parsons and made for the door, but he had not gone 6 steps down the passage when something hit him in the back of his neck with an agonizingly painful blow. It was as though a red-hot wire had been jabbed into him. He spun round just in time to see Miss Parsons dragging her son back into the doorway, while the boy pocketed a catapult.
"Goldstein!"
bellowed the boy as the door closed on him. But what most struck Winston was the look of the helpless fright of the woman's greyish face. Back in the flat, he stepped quickly past the telescreen and sat down at the table again, still rubbing his neck. The music from the telescreen had stopped. Instead, a clipped military voice was reading out, in a sort of brutal relish, a description of the armaments of the new floating fortress, which had just been anchored between Iceland and the Faroe Islands. Going to take a quick tea break. How's everyone doing this afternoon? Who's in chat? Time to campaign awful for Best Actor. You're kind. After I finish reading Jay and Logan, if you can, I'll start another stream and then we can all just sit on it and chat. I'll fight awful for that a lot. It'll be a good battle, I'll tell you that much. Okay. I'll probably read about, I'm not sure how many chapters. I'm almost done with chapter 2 here. I know chapter 3 isn't that long. With those children, he thought, that wretched woman must lead a life of terror. Another year, 2 years, and they would be watching her night and day for symptoms of unorthodoxy. Nearly all children nowadays were horrible. What was worse of all was that by means of such organizations as the spies, they were systematically turned into ungovernable little savages, and yet this produced in them no tendency whatsoever to rebel against the discipline of the party. Hello, Fonza. Welcome. On the contrary, they adored the party and everything connected with it. The songs, the processions, yelling of the banners, the hiking, the drilling of dummy rifles, the yelling of slogans, the worship of Big Brother. It was all a sort of glorious game to them. All their ferocity was turned outward, against enemies of the state, against foreigners, traitors, saboteurs, thought criminals. It was almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children. And with good reason, for hardly a week passed in which the Times did not carry a paragraph describing how some eavesdropping little sneak child hero was the phrase generally used, had overheard some compromising remark and denounced his parents to the thought police. The sting of the catapult bullet had worn off. He picked up his pen half-heartedly, wondering whether he could find something more to write in his diary. Suddenly, he began thinking of O'Brien again. Years ago. How long was it? 7 years, it must be. He had dreamed that he was walking through a pitch-dark room, and someone sitting to one side of him had said as he passed, "We shall meet again in the place where there is no darkness." It was said very quietly, almost casually, a statement, not a command. He walked on without pausing. What was curious was that at the time, in the dream, the words had not made much impression on him. It was only later, and by degrees, that they seemed to take significance. He could not now remember whether it was before or after having the dream he had seen O'Brien for the first time, nor could he remember when he had first identified the voice as O'Brien's. But at any rate, the identification existed. It was O'Brien who had spoken out to him out of the dark. Winston had never been able to feel sure. Even after this morning's flash of the eyes, it was still impossible to be sure whether O'Brien was a friend or an enemy. Nor did it even seem to matter greatly. There was a link of understanding between them more important than affection or partisanship. "We shall meet again in the place where there is no darkness," he had said. Winston did not know what it meant, only that in some way or another it would come true. The voice from the telescreen paused. A trumpet call, clear and beautiful, floated into the stagnant air. The voice continued raspingly. "Attention! Your attention, please! News flash has at this moment arrived from the Malabar front. Our forces in South India have won a glorious victory. I am authorized to say that the action we are now reporting may well bring the war within measurable distance of its end. Here is the news flash." "You're heading home now?" "Oh, that's lovely." Bad news coming, Winston thought. And sure enough, following on a gory description of the annihilation of the Eurasian army, with stupendous figures of killed and prisoner, came the announcement that, as from next week, the chocolate ration would be reduced to 30 grams to 20. Winston toasted again. The gin was wearing off, leaving a deflated feeling. The telescreen, perhaps to celebrate the victory, perhaps to drown the memory of the lost chocolate, crashed into "Oceania, 'tis for thee." He was supposed to stand to attention. However, in his present position he was invisible. "Oceania, 'tis for thee" gave way to lighter music. Winston walked over to his window, keeping his back to the telescreen. The day was still cold and clear. Somewhere far away was a rocket bomb exploded with a dull, reverberating roar. About 20 or 30 of them a week were falling on London at the present. Down in the street the wind flapped with the torn poster to and fro, and the word Ingsoc fitfully appeared and vanished. Ingsoc, the sacred principles of Ingsoc. Newspeak, doublethink, the mutability of the past. He felt as though he were wandering in the forests of the sea bottom, lost in a monstrous world where he himself was the monster. He was alone. The past was dead, the future unimaginable. What certainty had he that a single human creature now living was on his side? And what way of knowing that the dominion of the party would not endure forever? Like an answer, 3 slogans on the white face of the Ministry of Truth came back at him. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. He took a 25-cent piece out of his pocket. There, too, in tiny clear lettering, the same slogans were inscribed. And on the other face of the coin, the head of Big Brother. Even from the coin, the eyes pursued you. On coins, on stamps, on covers of books, on banners, on posters, and on the wrapping of a cigarette packet. Everywhere. Always the eyes were watching you, and the voice enveloping doors in the bath or in bed. No escape. Nothing was your own except for the few cubic centimeters inside your skull. Welcome, Cassie. The sun had shifted around, and the myriad windows of the Ministry of Truth, the light no longer shining on them, looked grim as the loopholes of a fortress. His heart quailed before the enormous pyramidal shape. It was too strong. It could not be stormed. 1,000 rocket bombs would not batter it down. He wondered again whom he was writing the diary. For the future, for the past, for an age that would be imaginary, and in front of him there lay not death but annihilation. The diary would be reduced to ashes and himself vapour. Only the thought police would read what he had written before they wiped it out of existence and out of memory. How could you make an appeal to the future when not a trace of you, not even an anonymous word scribbled on a piece of paper, could physically survive? The telescreen struck 14. He must leave in 10 minutes. He had to be back at work by 14:30. Curious, the chiming of the hour seemed to have put new heart into him. He was a lonely ghost uttering a truth that nobody would hear. But so long as he uttered it, in some obscure way the continuity was not broken. It was not by making yourself heard, but by staying sane you were carried on the human heritage. He went back to the table, dipped his pen and wrote, "To the future, or to the past, to a time when thought is free, when men are different from one another, and do not live alone, to a time when truth exists, and what is done cannot be undone, from the age of uniformity, from the age of solitude, from the age of Big Brother, from the age of doublethink, greetings!" Big Brother is always watching, that's true. "Hello, welcome, boy named Sophia." He was already dead, he reflected. It seemed to him that it was only now, when he had begun to be able to formulate his thoughts, that he had taken the decisive step. The consequences of every act included in the act itself. He wrote, "Thought crime does not entail death. Thought crime is death." Now that he had recognized himself as a man, it became important to stay alive long enough, as long as possible. The 2 fingers on his right hand were ink-stained. It was exactly the kind of detail that might betray you. Some nosing zealot in the ministry, a woman probably, someone like the little sandy-haired girl, the dark-haired girl from the fiction department, might start wondering why he had been writing during the lunch interval, why he had been using an old-fashioned pen, what he had been writing, and then drop a hint in the appropriate quarter. He went to the bathroom and carefully scrubbed the ink away with gritty dark brown soap, which rasps your skin like sandpaper, and was therefore well adapted to this purpose. He put the diary away in the drawer. It was quite useless to think of hiding it, but he could at least make sure whether or not its existence had been discovered. A hair laid across the page's ends was too obvious. With the tip of his finger he picked up an identifiable grain of whitish dust and deposited it in the corner of the cover, where it was bound to be shaken off if the book was moved. That's chapter 2. I'll probably do chapter 3, then we'll go from there. I need to readjust myself. I'm not in a very comfortable position right now. Goodness. Right. I don't believe chapter 3 is that long either. No, it's not. Scoot a little closer. Winston was dreaming of his mother. He must, he thought, have been 10 or 11 when his mother disappeared. She was a tall, statuesque, rather silent woman with slow movements and magnificent fair hair. His father, he remembered, was more vaguely as dark and thin, dressed in his neat, dark clothes. Winston remembered especially the very thin soles of his father's shoes, and wearing spectacles. The 2 of them must have evidently been swallowed up in one of the first great purges of the 50s. At the moment his mother was sitting in some place deep down beneath him, when his young sister in her arms. He did not remember his sister at all, except as a tiny, feeble baby, always silent, with large, watchful eyes. Both of them were looking up at him. They were down in some subterranean place, the bottom of a well, for instance, or a very deep grave, but it was a place which, already far below him, was itself moving downward. They were in the saloon of a sinking ship, looking up at him through darkening water. There was still air in the saloon. They could still see him and he them, but all the while they were sinking down, down to the green waters which is another moment must hide them from sight forever. He was out in the light and the air while they were being sucked down to death, and they were down there because he was up there. He knew it, and they knew it, and he could see in their faces or in their hearts only the knowledge that they must die in order that he might remain alive, and that this was part of the unavoidable order of things. He could not remember what had happened, but he knew in his dream that in some way the lives of his mother and his sister had been sacrificed to his own. It was one of those dreams which, while retaining the characteristics of dream scenery, are a continuation of one's intellectual life, and in which one becomes aware of facts and ideas which still seem new and valuable after one is awake. The thing that now suddenly struck Winston was that his mother's death, nearly 30 years ago, had been tragic and sorrowful in a way that was no longer possible. Tragedy, he perceived, belonged to an ancient time, to a time when there was privacy, love, and friendship, and when the members of the family stood by one another without needing to know the reason. Welcome, not Bobu? His mother's memory tore at his heart because she had died loving him when he was too young and selfish to love her in return, and because somehow, he did not remember how, she had sacrificed herself to a conception of loyalty that was private and unalterable. Such things, he saw, could not happen today. Today there were fear, hatred, and pain, but no dignity of emotion, or deep or complex sorrows. All this he seemed to see in his large eyes of his mother and sister, looking up at him through the green water, hundreds of fathoms down, and still thinking. Suddenly, he was standing on short, springy turf, on a summer evening when the slanting rays of the sun glided as summer evening, and the ground, the landscape that he was looking at recurred so often in his dreams that he was never fully certain whether or not he had seen it in the real world. In his waking thoughts he called it the Golden Country. It was an old rabbit-bitten pasture, with a foot track wandering across it and a mole-hole here and there. In the ragged hedge on the opposite side of the field, the boughs of an elm tree were swaying very faintly in the breeze, their leaves just stirring in the dense masses like a woman's hair. Somewhere near at hand, though out of sight, there was a clear, snow-moving stream where dace were swimming in the pools under the willow trees. The girl with dark hair was coming towards him across the field. With what seemed a single movement, she tore off her clothes and flung them disdainfully aside. Her body was white and smooth, but it aroused no desire in him. Indeed, he barely looked at it. What overwhelmed him in that instant was the admiration for the gesture with which she had thrown her clothes aside. With its graceful carelessness, it seemed to annihilate a whole culture, a whole system of thought. His big brother and the party and the thought police could all be swept into nothingness by a single splendid movement of the arm. That was a gesture belonging to the ancient time. Winston woke up with the words Shakespeare on his lips. The telescreen was giving forth an ear-splitting whistle which continued on the same note for 30 seconds. It was not 7:15, getting up time for office workers. Winston wrenched his body out of bed, naked, for a member of the party received only 3,000 clothing coupons annually, and a suit of pyjamas was 600, and seized a dingy singlet and a pair of shorts that were lying across a chair. The physical jerks would begin in 3 minutes. The next moment he was doubled up by a violent coughing fit, which nearly always attacked him as soon after waking. It emptied his lungs so completely that he could only begin breathing again by lying on his back and taking a series of deep gasps. His veins had swelled with the effort of the cough, and varicose also started itching. 30 to 40 group, yapped a piercing female group. 30 to 40 group, take your places, please. 30 to 40s. Winston sprang to attention in front of the telescreen, upon which the image of a youngish woman, scrawny but muscular, dressed in a tunic and gym shoes, had already appeared.
Arms bending and stretching, she raps out. Take your time by me. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, comrades, put a bit of life into it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pain of the coughing fit had not quite driven out of Winston's mind the impression made by his dream. And the rhythmic movements of the exercises restored it somewhat, as he mechanically shot his arms back and forth, wearing on his face the look of a grim enjoyment which was considered popular during the physical jerks. He was struggling to think back his way backward into the dim period of his late 50s. Everything faded. Back to his early childhood. It was extraordinarily difficult. Beyond the late 50s, everything faded. When there was no external record that you could refer to, even the outline of your own life lost its sharpness. You remember huge events which had quite probably not happened. You remember the details of incidents without being able to recapture the atmosphere. And there were long blank periods to which you could assign nothing. Everything had been different then. Even the names of countries and their shapes on the map had been different. Airstrip 1, for instance, had not so long ago been so called in those days. It had been called England or Britain, though London, he was fairly certain, was always called London. Winston could not definitely remember a time when his country had not been at war, but it was evident that there had been a fairly long interval of peace during his childhood, because one of his early memories was of an airship raid which appeared to take everyone by surprise. Perhaps it was the time when the atomic bomb had fallen on Colchester. He did not remember the raid itself, but he did remember his father's hand clutching his own as they hurried down into some place deep in the earth, round and round a spiral staircase, which rang under his feet and which eventually so wearied his legs that he began whimpering, and they had to stop and rest. His mother, in her slow, dreamy way, was following a long way behind them. She was carrying his baby sister, or perhaps it was only a bundle of blankets she was carrying. He was not certain whether his sister had been born then. Finally, they had emerged into a noisy, crowded place which he had realized to be a tube station. There were people sitting all over the stone-flagged floor, and other people, packed tightly together, were sitting on metal bunks, one above the other. Winston and his mother and his father found themselves a place on the floor, and near them an old man. "Hello, Goon." "I'm reading." Near them an old man and an old woman were sitting side by side on a bunk. The old man had on a decent suit and black cloth cap pushed back from very white hair. His face was scarlet, and his eyes were blue and full of tears. He reeked of gin. It seemed to breathe out of his skin in the place of sweat. And one could have fancied that the others, welling from his eyes, were under some grief that was genuine and unbearable. In his childish way, Winston grasped that some terrible thing, something that was beyond forgiveness and could never be remedied, had just happened. Hello from my literature class. Well, that's appropriate. It just happened. It also seemed to him that he knew what it was. Someone whom the old man loved, a little granddaughter perhaps, had been killed. Every few minutes the old man kept repeating, "We didn't ought to have trusted them. I said so more, didn't I? That's what come to trusting them. I said so all along. We didn't ought to have trusted the buggers." Later, Goon. But which buggers they didn't ought to have trusted, Winston could not now remember. Since about that time, war had been literally continuous, though strictly speaking it had not always been the same war. For several months during his childhood there was some confused street fighting in London itself, some of which he remembered vividly. But to trace out the history of the whole period, to say who was fighting whom at any given moment, would have been utterly impossible, since no written record, no spoken word ever made mention of any other alignment than the existing one. At this moment, for example, in 1984, if it was 1984, Oceania was at war with Eurasia in an alliance with East Asia. In no public or private
utterance was it ever admitted that the three powers had at the same time been grouped along different lines. Actually, as Winston well knew, it was only 4 years since Oceania had been at war with Eastasia and in alliance with Eurasia. But there was merely a piece of furtive knowledge which he happened to possess because his memory was not satisfactorily under control. Officially, the change of partners had never happened. Oceania was at war with Eurasia. Therefore, Oceania had always been at war with Eurasia. The enemy of the moment was always represented absolute evil, and it followed that any past or future agreement with him was impossible. The frightening thing, he reflected for the 10,000th time, as he forced his shoulders painfully backwards, with hands on his hip, they were gyrating their bodies from the waist, an exercise that was supposed to be good for the back muscles. The frightening thing was that it might all be true. If the party could thrust its hand into the past and say of this event or that, it never happened. That surely was more terrifying than mere torture and death. Going to take a quick tea break. I believe I have 1 page left. I do. Good tea. The party had said that Oceania had never been in alliance with Eurasia. He said Winston Smith, knew Oceania had been in alliance with Eurasia as short a time as 4 years ago. But where did that knowledge exist? Only in his own consciousness, which in any case must soon be annihilated. And if all others accepted the lie which the party had imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth. Who controls the past, ran the party's slogan, controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. And yet the past, though of its nature alterable, never had been altered. Whatever was true now, from everlasting to everlasting. It was quite simple. All that was needed was an unending series of victories over your own memory. Reality control, they called it in newspeak, doublethink. Stand easy, barked the conductress a little more genially. Winston sank his arms to his sides and slowly refilled his lungs with air. His mind slid away into the labyrinthian world of doublethink. To know and to not know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold out simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw back into memory again at the moment it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was ultimately subtlety. Consciously, to induce unconsciousness, and then, once again, become unconscious of the act of hypnosis you'd just performed. To even understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. The instructress had called them to attention again. "And now let's see which one of us can touch our toes," she said enthusiastically. "Right over from the hips, please, comrades. 1, 2, 1, 2. Winston loathed this exercise, which sent shooting pains all the way from his heels to his buttocks, which often ended by bringing on another coughing fit. The half-pleasant quality went out of his meditations. The past, he reflected, had not merely been altered, it had been actually destroyed. For how long can you establish even the most obvious fact when there existed no record outside your own memory? He tried to remember in what year he had first heard the mention of Big Brother. He thought it must have been at some time in the 60s, but it was impossible to be certain. In the histories, of course, Big Brother figured as the leader and guardian of the revolution since its very early days. His exploit had been gradually pushed backwards in time until already they extended into the fabulous world of the 40s and the 30s, when the capitalists in the strange cylindrical hat still rode through the streets of London, still in great gleaming motor cars or horse carriages with glass sides. There was no knowing how much of this legend was true and how much was invented. Winston could not even remember at what date the party itself had come into existence. He did not believe that he had ever heard the word Ingsoc before 1960, but it was possible that in old speak form, English socialism, that is to say, it had been current earlier. Everything melted into mist. Sometimes, indeed, you can put your finger on a definite lie. It was not true, for example, as was claimed in the history books, that the party invented airplanes. He remembered airplanes since his earliest childhood, but you could prove nothing. There was never any evidence. Just once in his whole life he had held back his hands, unmistakable documentary proof of the falsification of historical fact. And on that occasion, "Smith!" screamed this shrewish voice from the telescreen. 6079 Smith, what W? Yes, you! Bend lower, please. You can do better than that. You're not trying. Lower, please. That's better, comrade. Now stand at ease, the whole squad, and watch with me. Welcome back, Ray. You got the tail end of it, but I'll be chatting a little bit longer. A sudden hot sweat had broken out all over Winston's body. His face remained completely inscrutable. Never show dismay, never show resentment. A single flicker of the eyes could give you away. He stood watching while the instructress raised her arms above her head and, one could not say gracefully, but he, with remarkable neatness and efficiency, bent over and tucked the first joint of her fingers under her toes. There, comrade, that's how I want to see you doing it. Watch me again. I'm 39, I've had 4 children. Now look. She bent over again. You can see my knees aren't bent. You can all do it if you want to, she added as she straightened herself up. Anyone under 45 is perfectly capable of touching his toes. We don't all have the privilege of fighting on the front lines, but at least we can all keep fit. Remember our boys on the Malabar front, and all the sailors in the floating fortress. Just think what they have put up with. Now try again. That's better, comrade. That's much better, she added encouragingly as Winston, with a huge, violent lunge, succeeded in touching his toes with knees unbent for the first time in several years. And I believe that's where I'll end it now, because my throat is starting to hurt. That's enough reading for now. Thank you. And now I'm going to start a different stream so I can just talk to people.